I guess AI is only as evil as the person that is feeding the data into it, or the person that is like kind of like designing it. So the focus would be on like those people versus the underlying technology itself.
Hey everyone, it's Salimi here, and I'm super excited to bring you another insightful episode. Martin Lee joins me on this episode of NEWFORUM, and Martin is a multi-data journalist at Nansen. We're going to chat more about what he's up to, Nansen, and what his work as a data journalist at Nansen entails. Also, it'll be amazing to hear his views on the importance of decentralized graphs, data reputation, composability, and credentials. Hey, Martin, welcome to this episode of NEWFORUM.
Yeah, hi. Thanks so much for having me, and yeah, really excited to I guess discuss all things crypto.
Yes. So, who is Martin, and how did your journey begin? How did your crypto journey begin?
So essentially, I'm a data journalist at Nansen. I got into crypto not that long ago actually. So I bought my first bunch of BTC and ETH way back in mid 2020. So that was roughly when I graduated as well. I was looking for investable asset classes, and a friend actually introduced me to, I guess at the time the main narrative was Bitcoin as a store of value, which I really I guess I really understood, and I really kind of had the roughly the same impression as well when I was looking through Bitcoin, and ETH was really interesting. So I started buying Bitcoin and ETH. I think the first time I bought was probably like May of 2020, more or less right after the whole COVID crash period. Yeah, so like that was when I first started getting into crypto, spending just way too much time, spending way too much time just reading and learning about crypto. I was also working at a e-commerce firm right after graduation. I had actually interned there before while I was still a student. Was fortunate enough to actually get an offer. So I was working there full time, but I was just spending way too much time just reading about crypto, learning about crypto, that I figured that it would make much more sense if I was actually working in crypto. Fortunate enough to actually see a job opening for the current role which I'm working in now. I applied and somehow got it. Yeah. And I guess till now I still don't really understand how I got it, but yeah, just really happy and really pleased to actually be here today.
Most of the time we hear like similar stories, but everybody has their own, unique kind of way of entering into it. So I'm curious to know, like, in traditional sense, we still use the term data journalist. So what is the difference between your work as a data journalist and somebody else's work, in the traditional sense?
Yeah, so I guess my job title is quite ambiguous to most people. And it's also like, I guess it's hard to kind of like tell what exactly I do day to day. There's kind of like, I guess like two main different like scopes. So one of it would be more like content related. So I kind of do up a long form written content to kind of like grow SEO and for like content marketing purposes. So that's one. The other part would also be to work with various journalists from like different sources. So it could be like Wall Street Journal, could be Bloomberg, could be CoinDesk, Cointelegraph. So if there's any like large event, so for example, the whole like FTX saga, or even something much smaller like Polygon's ZK testnet launching and stuff. Yeah, if they need any like if they have any on-chain data requests, or if they're just wondering what's actually happening on chain, so they will usually reach out by email or Telegram or via Twitter as well, and I'll be the one responding actually. So that's more or less my like day to day.
You have to stay on top of like everything, make sure that everything that is going on, all the trends and all. How do you keep up with that, in terms of your mental health?
Yeah, so that's actually a really good question. I keep up with a lot of news on Twitter mostly. From a mental health perspective, I kind of like diversify my time outside of crypto. So like when I'm not working, I try to find hobbies that are not crypto related. just so I kind of have like a more diversified life and slightly less obsessed about the whole industry in general. I find that actually helps a ton. So like sports, music, or just like chilling and just and hanging out with friends that are not in the crypto at all. That's probably the most important like tip that I have if you want to like protect your whole mental health.
I think that's definitely a nice way to go about it. Also, like at the close of 2022, you shared a post that you decided to pen down some thoughts, general lessons after working at Nansen and in crypto for slightly over a year. Can you discuss, maybe share this with our community? What exactly did you pen down, and what are some of the thoughts and insights and learnings?
Yeah, so I think I had like, I guess, two main categories. So one of it was general thoughts on working in crypto, and the other one is like general lessons which I learned throughout the year. So I think the first like I think the first part which was thoughts on working in crypto would be that the entire space is still very much operating like one giant startup. So if you work in a project or a crypto protocol, if you aren't in like Binance or a very, very large established VC like A16Z, for example, you are very likely in a very small startup that is in a startup industry itself. So then it creates like an environment of like very, very fast pace and very high rate of growth, as well as just general innovation happening. So that can be very, very interesting and very exciting for some people, but it's also not for everyone. Like not everyone is kind of like suited for a very high, like I guess like very fast-paced environment. So like if you want to work in a space, you have to be like really, really okay with that. And there's a ton of like challenges which also comes along with that. Like your whole job scope might change quite quickly depending on your or on the stage of whatever which are joining. And there will be a ton of like challenges because you are trying to like solve really difficult problems, and there isn't really like a roadmap per se on how you go about doing that. There's a lot of things which you have to learn while you're going through it. So because of that, you can kind of like grow and learn a lot, but it comes at a cost of you have to be willing to kind of put in the effort. So it's not really a space that I would recommend to everyone because like it's just different personalities and just like different kind of like lifestyles, I guess. But the plus side is that if you are interested in a space and if you want to work in a space, the space has one of the more meritocratic systems where it's really based on what you have done and what you can actually bring to the table versus I guess your so-called credentials. Like in most cases, like if you're in like TradFi, for example, you want to get into like JP Morgan, I guess there's like an easy way, and it's like going into like a really strong target school, joining a bunch of like business clubs, and then you more or less guarantee a spot in one of the large banks in the world or large consulting firms. But if you want to work in crypto, the journey is slightly different. While going to like Harvard, for example, definitely helps as like proof of like intelligence, there are like a ton of other ways that you can actually end up in the space. So you can just like write on Twitter, write on Substack. You can showcase, I guess, your own interest and your own skill set in a way which suits you best. And you're not like confined to like traditional tests and very traditional metrics. So it's kind of like a very level playing field where anyone, anywhere in the world, as long as you have access to the internet and a computer or a phone, you can kind of like break into the space given enough like time and effort, which is not so like common in other industries. So while I wouldn't recommend the space to everyone, everyone has quite an equal opportunity at this point, at least to actually work in a space if they want to do so. Yeah, and like for like general lessons that I've learned about the space is that like transparency is really everything. You shouldn't trust, you should always try to verify. And like a lot of projects in the space, at least in my view, don't really have a UI UX issue. Okay, I mean UI UX is not the best in the space, and that's like an open secret that everyone knows. But I would say like UI UX isn't the main issue. Like a lack of real product market fit is the main issue to me. Because like, for example, so this was like back during the whole like Axie Infinity craze. The onboarding process for Axie Infinity is pretty much the same as most DeFi protocols. So you have to have a wallet, you have to bridge funds over. I guess like it's very similar to a lot of like DeFi protocols, right? But you at the same time you didn't see a lot of DeFi protocols reaching the amount of daily active users which Axie Infinity hit. So it kind of became very, very clear that if your product is good enough and if your product is something that people genuinely want, UI UX would not be a stopper for most people. So I would say like a lot of like a lot of projects today, they primarily have a product market fit issue instead of a UI UX issue. And solving UI UX would only marginally increase whatever user base that they have. While if they find true product market fit, the UI UX would not be as big of a barrier to entry.
I really need, and like you said, product fit, I really need. I think I will. There's a lot of stuff that we're using that the UX isn't necessarily the best, but because you really need it. And so we've got a lot of, users or people using it, but then we do say, oh man, I really wish this would be a little bit improved, would have been better. So I guess they kind of walk side to side in a way. I think that's a great lesson and point. And, you touched a bit about credentials don't really matter in a sense in Web3. I understand what you meant, but like, in Web3, we still talk about credentials in another way, right? And so do you want to maybe touch a bit about the difference in case if someone is watching and they're like, or listening and they're like, well, maybe credentials as in my school graduation, what is it called? My transcript and stuff like that might not really matter, but there are other credentials that are kind of valid in this space. If you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, so credentials don't really matter in the sense of like traditional credentials. So like which school you went to, because I guess a lot of people, they kind of like chase for, I would say, badges, like very traditional badges. So like which school they came from, which like society that they were part in school, and like stuff like that. But for crypto, it's kind of like slightly different. So credentials matter, but there's like two main types of like credentials. So one of it is on-chain credentials, which is your own on-chain activity. Have you like breached funds, for example? Have you used DEXs? Have you bought an NFT? So that is one way that a lot of places use to actually gauge your own like crypto nativeness. Because like I would say a lot of people have probably bought like some Bitcoin or some ETH in some stage in the last like 2 years. Like I'm pretty sure like a decent amount of people have actually bought that, but not many people have actually interacted on chain. They don't have a wallet, they haven't used Uniswap, for example, haven't used SushiSwap. So actually using those protocols gives you quite a substantial edge over people who don't, purely because you then gain an understanding which they don't have. So it's actually quite different like interacting with, I guess, like with a DEX versus just reading about it. There's a lot of like things which you only discover when you actually use protocols yourselves. So there's like one type of credential. The other type of credential would be like, for example, if you're a engineer, you can actually have your own like side projects and stuff. Or if you're not technical, you can write your own like research pieces and stuff, post them on Twitter or like Substack. So that's also like another way for you to prove your own genuine interest and your own passion for the space.
That's wonderful. Those are wonderful thoughts. Thanks for sharing that. I wanted to, like, we touched a bit about Nansen, and I thought maybe you can share a bit more about the vision and the mission. An overview of that would be wonderful.
In just a really, really short one-liner, it would be to actually surface a signal and create winners in the future of finance. So we strongly believe that the blockchain, crypto will really power the future of finance, and a large part of the world, like NFTs, for example, can go way beyond like financial aspects. But yeah, so like in a really quick one-liner, that's like the overall like mission and vision for what we're trying to build. So on-chain data is transparent, and it's also open for anyone to freely explore on various block explorers. But it's kind of difficult to actually figure out what's really going on, because all you see are like alphanumeric hashes and stuff like that. So it's quite difficult. Like for example, if you see a particular transaction, a particular transaction happening, but if you don't know who is behind the transaction, it's really difficult to kind of like figure out what's really going on. So we kind of enrich that on-chain data using wallet labels to give our users a clearer picture of what's really happening on-chain. So we mostly label entities or like really prominent figures. So like Justin Sun, for example. And we don't like dox individuals. So like my own wallet isn't like dox stuff like that. But for individual wallets, we kind of add a particular like wallet characterization to it. So for example, if a wallet is really into NFTs and has traded a bunch of NFTs, the wallet will have like will have a tag which kind of says a heavy NFT trader, for example. Yeah, so we add a wallet activity kind of like category to it, which then sheds some light on what that wallet usually does. Yeah, so that's like more or less what we try to do. And we also kind of like aggregate and also curate data via like various dashboards to kind of like give our users a clearer understanding of what's really happening behind like certain NFTs or certain tokens, for example. Yeah, so that's like a really quick summary.
I was just, reading a bit and the number that you analyzed, 240 million plus labeled addresses and their activities, so that we can get our real-time crypto, DeFi, and NFT insights. I think that's really like a huge number. And back to your role and the role as a data journalist or data journalism in general, what can we expect in this field in the future? As in, what other forms can it take?
I guess with really open and transparent data, anyone can kind of be their own storyteller. In a way, as we have seen with like past events, like the whole FTX news was covered much better over on crypto Twitter than a lot of large mainstream media players. And it was also covered much more accurately and much faster as well, because a lot of these news sites were just syndicating what was already said in various like posts on Twitter actually. So yeah, there's always that like slight delay if you are not able to kind of like be comfortable with analyzing on-chain data yourself. So that's actually where I see the future of like journalists who want to cover crypto. Like they have to be really, really crypto native and also be very, very, very comfortable with analyzing the chain themselves. Because then they can kind of like break stories on their own. They don't have to rely on various third parties to kind of like give them information. And they can also like kind of like see certain like stories before it's officially announced. So for example, like if a protocol is doing a fundraising round, usually they will raise in USDC or USDT, for example, and you can kind of like see those transactions actually happen before the protocol officially announces that they are doing a raise. And we've actually seen that happen for a few protocols, which I won't name, but we've actually stumbled upon a few of such instances actually. So for example, if you're a journalist and if you're really comfortable with analyzing on-chain data yourself, you could actually write that story weeks or maybe even months before, like, because from what I understand, like when a fundraise actually happens and when it is actually announced, it can be weeks or months later. So if you can analyze on-chain data yourself, you can actually break that story weeks or months earlier, and you then become like a more credible source of information, and also like become much faster at breaking, like at having like actual breaking news. Yeah, so I would say like journalists that want to cover the space really have to be very, very good at and comfortable with exploring like various block explorers and various blockchain platforms.
That's like great advice. I'm curious to know, like, what was it from your background that you would say kind of like prepared you for this role? Because if someone is listening and they're really interested in, being in that industry or in that area, like how can they navigate it?
I would say the main thing I gained from my previous job was being comfortable with a lot of data. So I don't have like actual data science or like data analytics skill sets, but I am comfortable with like looking at like data and kind of like getting insights from there. So that kind of helps a lot. Like when I see a bunch of like numbers, I'm not like, I'm quite comfortable with that and I can get a level of insight from it. So that's like the main transferable skill. But almost everything else that I do day to day now, like I kind of like picked it up along the way. So like before I joined Nansen, I wasn't extremely familiar with analyzing on-chain data and going through Etherscan, for example. But I would say now I am like average to slightly above average at it, or at least that's what I hope. So and that actually counts with just like spending a lot of time doing it myself, like figuring things out, just exploring on my own. So I would say like if you want to break into the space, you should find an area that you want to break into and start taking steps of actually doing the job on your own. So let's say you want to get into like if you want to be a research analyst, for example, no one's stopping you from actually like doing your own analysis and posting it online. So like I would say like find an area you want to work in and then start making steps towards actually doing the job.
Yeah, do the job. I think that's something that we've heard a lot. Like you have to, there's the theory part, but then you have to put it into practice. So yeah, that's great. Also, you tweeted that you were surprised to see so many crypto books on the finance and investments, almost none on the tech. Clear sign that people view it strictly as an investable asset and not world-changing technology. I'm curious to know, like, how can we maybe change this mindset, or like what other maybe insights like got you to share this post or this tweet?
I think the main thing that kind of like triggered that whole idea for me was the whole Reddit NFTs. So Reddit NFTs has a lot of mainstream adoption, but has also been heavily criticized for not actually onboarding people into the space. So that whole debate stems from the fact that I can't remember the actual numbers now, but I think there's probably like 5 million wallets which have a Reddit NFT, but easily like 90% or like 95% of those wallets have not actually transacted on chain or like had any real economic activity on chain. So there's this huge argument that while there's a lot of wallets holding Reddit NFTs, the whole Reddit NFT movement has not actually successfully onboarded the masses. But the way I kind of see it is that it kind of boils down to what you define as onboarding someone into the space. Must a user transact on chain and have a ton of like economic like activity via like purchasing NFTs or like, using DEXs, for example, paying gas fees? Like is that the actual definition of onboarding a user, or is adoption more focused on users utilizing the underlying technology instead, be it in whatever like shape or form? So I guess like that's like something that has caused like quite a bit of debate. And I myself, like I'm leaning towards like adoption of the underlying technology in whatever shape or form as the more important metric versus having like transactions as the important metric. So it really kind of differs from like person to person, but that's like my own view. Yeah, so there's that like debate going on. So yeah, I guess for now at least it's very, very clear that crypto is seen as a investable asset or like a tradable asset instead of a underlying technology that may or may not like change the world in the future.
Very interesting. And I was also thinking that like we've got a lot of like creators in our community, and so if they're listening to you right now, you know how we've got this term crypto artists, NFT artists, how like what is really the difference? Like if you want like perhaps like a creator to find everything you said like relatable, how can they connect it all?
I think for creators, if you want to utilize like crypto or like blockchain in whatever you're creating, you need to be very aware of the possibilities and also the limitations which currently exist in the technology. I think a lot of people don't realize that most NFTs are not fully on chain. Yeah, like if you look at the smart contract, the smart contract then contains a link to usually like AWS or Google Cloud, which then stores the actual photo that's displayed on the NFT, and the photo itself is not on chain. And the reason for that is because like these photos can require like a lot of storage space, and it's simply very, very costly to actually store that on chain. So on chain, all you have is the actual address or the URL which then points to the image. So for example, if you're like a NFT artist, you need to be aware of that limitation, and then you like create accordingly. Or if you're a writer and you want to create like a token gated community, you also need to understand how like tokens work, like what are the upsides, downsides, and you really need to kind of like be very involved in the space for you to then create a really successful project or a community while utilizing like crypto. Because while there are a lot of potential benefits, such as wider distribution, for example, and also the ability to actually engage fans in a more intimate level, it also adds a lot of layers of various complexity that you may not want. So like, for example, let's say you're a creator, you launch a token, you are kind of like holders of your token, even if they are like real true fans, because there is a monetary value attached to it now that is fully tradable. You then have to account for like speculation and the whole idea that holders of your token, even if they don't admit it, there is always a desire for future potential financial upside, because it's a very, very human thing. So like as a creator, like, do you really want to take that on? There's a lot of questions that you have to ask yourself, and you shouldn't like just jump straight in. You should take like your time to really understand and then figure it out.
Some deep advice there. And I guess I would say, coming from a data journalist who is spending a lot of years, spending a lot of time with information and all that. So these are really great. And so I wanted to, so back to your role being a data journalist, I cannot help but bring this topic of AI. What do you think about it? Like, it's trending and AI assisting creators. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think like very early on in the whole like AI hype cycle, which was probably like a couple of years ago, people were like very, very worried that the AI or like robots would actually like replace a bunch of jobs. But it's becoming more and more apparent that AI is kind of like a tool that helps you do your job better. Or at least the current implementations of it are kind of as such, like ChatGPT, for example. So like the AI has helped a bunch of students actually do their homework. Yeah, it has helped like
conversation.
yeah, and like it has also like helped a lot of like writers kind of like write certain things, or it even helps with research actually. Like if you ask it like certain questions, it can give you like really quite like pretty decent quality like answers. While it cannot be trusted fully, because at the end of the day, it's still based on whatever data set which OpenAI fed it. It forms a really good starting point for you to kind of like start from, and then like do your own research after. So I would say it definitely saves a lot of time, helps point you in a good enough direction most of the time, and can be really used to kind of like supplement your own workflow today. I personally haven't used it as much as I would like to yet. Haven't really had the time to kind of sit down and figure it out yet, but it's definitely something that I'm looking to use and leverage on. Because like with so many tools kind of being available, if you don't learn how to use them, you will be at a disadvantage against people who are actively using them. So yeah, like I would say like definitely have to like spend time exploring, learning in them, and kind of like understanding how can you fit that into your current workflow.
Yeah, that's great. But do you think that I mean, totally, you kind of nailed it. And I joined the Twitter lives and space, and they were talking about how AI is teaching us and we are teaching AI. There was this idea about that we're just pretty much like training it for free, you know?
Yeah.
And I also think about like I mean, I know when you try to use it, it talks about don't put anything sensitive, but this thing is helping people. So they're just putting whatever information. And so like, what are like the ethical sides of all of this?
Yeah, yeah. I guess that's probably like the hardest question about like any new like technological frontier. Like where do you draw the line between general improvement of life versus like certain ethical or various like moral kind of like debates that happen. So personally, like my own view is that there's a ton of like information that is like open today, whether you like it or not. And if you truly value privacy, probably the only way is to not use the internet. Yeah, because like someone is tracking you in some way, shape, or form the moment you use the internet, the moment you interact with the web. Someone is going to track you. Yeah, like it could be Google, could be like whatever, like e-commerce website you're on. like everyone is really tracking you because like data is a really, really important commodity that everyone's going after. So I would say like it would probably be much easier to kind of get comfortable with the whole idea that your own data is very difficult for it to kind of be private versus trying to like fight it, because I just don't think you can fight it unless you really unplug from the internet. So I would say like you kind of have to accept it. It's not something which we all want, but it's kind of like unavoidable now. So we kind of have to accept it, and we kind of then have to like trust that a lot of these underlying technologies kind of have to remain neutral, because like technology in most cases is always neutral, but the implementation of it or the application of it sometimes can be quite like skewed or quite skewed towards a certain agenda. So I kind of view that as the more important like focus. I guess AI is only as evil as the person that is feeding the data into it, or the person that is like kind of like designing it. So the focus would be on like those people versus the underlying technology itself. So like I would say like where the focus should be on, but it's also like a really difficult thing, like where do you draw the line with like gene editing, for example, and stuff like that. So yeah, definitely really tough debate that that has been going on for like probably like decades now, but yeah, it's really difficult.
Yeah, it is. It is. I was also thinking that, like, do you think that because we're talking about the internet and how if you're using the internet, everything is pretty much you have not much control. So do you think that is this why like decentralization or this idea of decentralized graphs, data, reputation, and all of that could solve this?
I would say like it's quite difficult to solve like privacy related issues, or at least like current implementations of blockchain and stuff are not like super private. We kind of have like two extremes. Like we either have like quite private hidden stuff like those like privacy networks, and then we swing all the way to the other end and have like fully open data on ETH, for example. But I would say like blockchain kind of solves the whole like ownership layer. So like currently when you use the internet, you don't really know what's going on, like who's tracking you and like where your data is going and stuff like that. So there's like a huge unknown. But like blockchain, you can kind of at least like figure out like where the data is going and what can be seen, what can't be seen. And you also have clearer ownership lines. So like for example, when you do create a meme online, currently today, very, very rarely do I see the original creator of the meme being like recognized for it. Because like once it's on the internet, then there's like a million copies of it. It's hard to like really, really tell because there's no like timestamp for it. But like if the internet was like blockchain based, and then you have like timestamps for like certain like creations, you can then attribute on like the original creation to a particular person, for example. So then like ownership becomes much more clear, and then there's a bunch of like upsides to that. And we're actually like starting to actually see a trend towards more ownership, even in like very web 2 based stuff. So if you look at OnlyFans, for example, is an example I like to bring up a lot, because like OnlyFans essentially like shifts, while they have quite a high creator fee, platform fee, if I don't know the exact number, but it's like relatively high. But as a creator, you then have more control over your audience. You have a way to reach them more directly, and vice versa, right? Like your audience can kind of like reach out to you and support you in a more direct manner versus like platforms that are more traditional, like Facebook, YouTube, for example. Yeah, so we're actually kind of like already seeing shifts towards that, and like crypto brings that to a whole new level once a lot of the current issues get like worked out and stuff.
Well said. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I also want to know, is there any project that you're working on that you're super excited about? And then maybe if you have any recommendations or advice for our community or audience?
Yeah, so I'm not actually like working on any project outside of Nansen. So I would say like project I'm most excited about is Nansen. But if talking about like outside of that, I tend to gravitate towards media type startups in general. I've been like a long time fan of Morning Brew, for example. It's not like crypto related, but yeah, just like really huge fan of what they've built and the whole brand which they've created, which started from a daily newsletter just a couple of years ago. Now it's a full-fledged giant media brand of sorts that has like newsletters for essentially almost every industry or like everything which they can cover. So I would say like media type stuff and like creator driven stuff interests me a lot. So that's an area that I'm like really looking at and really excited to kind of see how crypto kind of like improves that.
Thank you so much. And if you maybe wanna share if you have any last advice, and then where our listeners, community, anyone listening to you can find you on your social platform.
Yeah, so I think just general advice, if you are new to crypto or you've been around for a while and you are looking to like work in the space, for example, or like just looking to understand more, I think a lot of people make the mistake of jumping in too quickly from both a investor standpoint and also someone that wants to work in the space full-time standpoint. So I would say if you truly believe that like crypto is gonna be around for a while, there's kind of like no rush. Like adoption is still like much smaller than a lot of other emerging technologies out there in the world. So like I would say like really take the time to understand the space more, understand yourself better as well, and to figure out where exactly your area of interest lie. And in terms of like if you wanna like find me or like reach out to me, mostly active on like Twitter. Handle is the MLPX, so THEMLPX. You can probably find me there. You can DM me. Sometimes I do take a while to kind of respond purely because there's quite a lot of like spam bots that like just spam my account. Yeah, so but I always try to respond.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Martin. And
Yeah,
definitely
thank you.
I can say that for sure. He's very good at responding to his messages. So definitely DM him if you have any specific questions for him. And we will have all his links in the description below. And thank you all for being a part of today's forum. If you want to get more involved in our community, make sure to follow us on our social platforms. Twitter is NEWFORUM_NCO, and we're NEWFORUM.io on NewLife.io. And you can also join our Discord community, and we will have all the links in the description. And take a moment, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. And I will see you in the next episode. Bye.